Welcome to this tutorial. So what we're going to be looking at today is a technique in After Effects. It's also available in Premiere as well, but it's much more controllable in After Effects, so that's why we're going to be looking at it, which provides what can only be described as a very contemporary look. It's a very sort of, you see it a lot in a lot of kind of pro level videos, you know, it's something that works really, really well. And this is sort of the ability to change values smoothly and customize the way values change. Those values might be things like the speed of the clip. This is something that we call speed ramping, or it might be other things like rotation or zoom or whatever it might be. But what we're doing is we're affecting the way that a transition between two states happens, not as a sort of as a continuous movement, but as something that we can customize. So let's have a quick look at what that might look like. You've probably seen very similar things to this in the past. This is something that I've done. I've not spent a huge amount of time on it, if I'm honest, because it's just more about getting the techniques down. But something a bit like this, where you can see how the sort of the rotation makes the transition into the next clip. We move back, and then we zoom out of this one into the next one. We slow down the 360, and then we rotate into the next shot, and we slow down the kick turn. You know, and the point about it is that it's designed to make your images work to have sort of maximum visual impact. Now, here's the thing about stuff like speed ramping and what have you. It's only ever as good as the clips that you've got in the first place. So it's not going to make tawdry footage look a great deal better than it already is, okay? But what it can do, I mean, what it really does very well, particularly speed ramping, is it emphasizes a great shot really nicely. So it builds up to the point where you really want to make that crescendo, that moment of like, go, you know, wow, what a shot, and then dive into the next one again. That's when it works really well. So the first key, I would say, to using graph editors and speed ramping and things like that is get your footage right first, you know, because that's the key. Anyway, let's dive in, shall we? So the first thing to say is we're going to be doing something in After Effects today which I don't normally encourage you to do, which is actually editing a sequence in After Effects. Normally you'd want to edit your sequence in Premiere, and you can do that and then transfer it over to After Effects. So I'm just going to show you what that looks like first, and then we're going to get into After Effects. So let's take our clips. We're going to start with this one, the wheel, and this one with the jump into a wheelie, and then the not the long kick turn. Next it's the wide 360, wasn't it, in that sequence, and then the long kick turn. Okay, so these are all clips from Tailography. So big shout out to George for providing these. Thank you very much. George is also our rider today. So thank you very much for that, George. So 3 of these you might notice are in a purple color compared to this one, which is blue, and that one also has audio. And what you'll notice is that these have been shot with a higher frame rate so that they give a slow motion look already. So what we're going to do with these, first of all, if we want them to look kind of like normal speed, is it depends on the frame rate of the camera that you've been using. I think for the one that George was using for these shots, I'm going to speed these up to about 400%, so about 4 times as fast as the clip is. What that means is that the clip is running effectively at about 25% of normal speed. So I'm going to be just going to right clicking on this clip, for example, going to speed and duration and upping that to about 400%, and that to me makes it kind of look about right in terms of speed. There we go. Okay, but you've still got that lovely frame rate detail that we can use later on. Same with this one then, so I'm going to right click on this one, speed and duration, and I'm going to get that up to about 400%, and then this one's speed and duration and 400%. Okay, so first of all then, a little tip with Premiere, by the way, you can click between the clips and just hit backspace and it will just shuffle them up together. Okay, so we're in Premiere at the moment then, and we've got our sequence. Let's say we want to cut that one there. Now this one we want to cut shortly before, so just as it goes sharp, maybe like there. So I'm going to cut that one, and I also want to cut it as he goes out of the frame, like so. So I'm going to just drag that back like that, highlight and shuffle, highlight and shuffle. This one I'm going to take it from about there, like that. and kind of take it through to about there, maybe like so. So I'm only doing this very, very loosely at the moment just to show you what's going to happen when we take this into After Effects. So I'm going to just drag that back like that, and then over. The fun thing I'm going to do is just highlight this one. On a Mac it's Command L for unlink, okay, but you can also do it by going to clip and hitting link or unlink. Okay, so if I've done that and I want to link them back together, I'd highlight both the audio and the visual, clip, and then link, and then now they're stuck together again. So when I highlight the clip, I also get the audio. What I'm going to be doing is going to clip and unlink, just so I can get rid of that audio. So here's my sequence so far. Okay, now then, what I can do is, using the Adobe Dynamic Link process, what it means is I can have multiple Adobe applications open at the same time, and I can link between them, which is a really, really useful tool. So I can either click on a single clip, or I can highlight all the ones that I want to use, right click on them, and then I'm going to go up here to replace with After Effects composition. I'm just going to click on that, and that will now take me into After Effects. And now you can see that each of these clips has been shortened by the amount that I've edited it, but there's also the rest of that clip there if I need it. Okay, so that's my sequence then that I've just created in Premiere. There we go. And what we're now going to do is we're going to use a graph editor to help us to make some transitions and things between these shots. Now, just something to bear in mind, quite often these kinds of techniques work really well when they're attached to music and sound effects. Okay, and when we're editing here in After Effects outside of Premiere, particularly with what we're going to be doing in a minute, which is speed ramping, so changing the speeds of the clips, we're not necessarily going to be in time with any music that we had in Premiere. So what you're also going to want to do is, again, something slightly unusual for After Effects, is we're going to bring in our audio track. Okay, so I'm just going to use this one, and I can bring it down onto my timeline. And so this is an audio track here, and if I open it up, I can actually go into audio and waveform, and now I can see my audio waveform just like I would be able to in Premiere. Okay, so what I can do is I can go through that, and I can work out where I want the audio to begin, and then I can like line it up to that point, and now I'll have my audio playing as I play through my clip, so I can align my video transitions to my audio. And it also works well if you've got like swooshing sound effects and things like that to add onto your clip. Now, you might not necessarily want to render it out of After Effects with that audio attached, so you could always take it away again later. If you want to bring your sequence back into Premiere and do more things with it, you can take the audio back out again. It's just there as a reference, but it's useful just to know that you can do that. Okay, now I'm going to take that out because I don't want that sound interfering with my my voice trying to explain what we're doing, so I'm just going to take that out for now, but you might want to keep that in for reference, as I say. Right, so we've had plenty of introduction. Let's dive into the graph editor then. So what we're going to be doing is using effectively a tool, which is this button here, which is a graph. I'm not going to click on it just yet because we haven't got anything to change yet. But what we're going to be doing is using that to help us to customize our transitions between two states. Now, I've said that a couple of times. What does that even mean? Well, let's do a really basic one just to show you what I'm talking about. So here's my close-up on the wheel. So I'm going to open up my close-up on the wheel. I'm going to go into transform. And at about maybe, let's say, 2 seconds in. Okay, so this is just me doing it arbitrarily. You might want to do it to music. It's up to you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on this clip to make it, to scale it up so that then I can rotate this clip to transition into the next shot. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to go to about 2 seconds in, and I'm going to click my stopwatch for scale, and I'm also going to click my stopwatch for rotation. Now you'll notice the moment I click the stopwatch, I've got something that looks like a graph here already, and I can use that to tell After Effects that I want to include this stuff in my graph editing set. However, we're going to do this a slightly different way, because I tend to find that using that tends to cloud what we're trying to do. It adds more information than we perhaps need at any given time. So this process I'm going to show you is perhaps slightly slower. but it's a bit more precise, and it just allows you to kind of keep your head above water in terms of all the things that you're trying to change. So let's make a change to our scale then. Let's move our playhead marker along to about here, let's say, and I'm going to now make a change. So I can add another keyframe by clicking here, or I can just change the value, and that will add a new keyframe onto my timeline. So I'm going to drag that up to about, what, 160, let's say 160%. Okay, so because this was shot with a nice camera by George, I've zoomed it into 160%, but it's still pretty good looking. You know, it's not de-resed particularly, so it's looking pretty good. Okay, so again, that's something to think about if you are wanting to use speed ramping and things like that, or graph editing for these transitions and so on, is that you kind of want to have as much quality footage as you can in terms of frame rate, in terms of focus and sharpness, everything else. Okay, right, now what I've got now here on my timeline is I've got 2 points. And if I move my playhead between the two, you can see that my clip is zooming in and out. Okay, and if you watch this percentage thing here, as I move my clip, that percentage changes between the two. But if we play it through, look, it doesn't look particularly dramatic yet. It just looks like just a change between the two. Now, the fact that it's handheld is softening it a little bit, and that's great, but we still can do more with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure one of these 2 keyframes is highlighted, and I'm going to go up to this button here, the graph editor, and I'm going to click graph editor, and lo and behold, we now have a graph. Now, your graph comes in different flavors, and you might not see this yet. What you can do is drop down this button here next to the eye. This allows you to choose which kinds of graphs you want. Now the likelihood is that because we're changing scale, you'll probably be on the value graph, but you might not necessarily be. It just depends on what you're doing. You know, so when we're doing speed ramping later on, for example, some people prefer to use the speed graph, which I'll show you in a minute when we're doing the speed ramping. But to be honest, the value graph I think is the easiest way to think about this. So what we've got here and in our graph is we've got our clip that's going along at 100% scale, and now over this amount of time, from 2 seconds to 2.5, let's move it back to 3, just so you can kind of get your head around what's going on. Okay, so here between 2 seconds and 3 seconds, we are zooming in to 160%. Okay, so 100% now zooming to 160%, and that's a straight line. So if we move our playhead marker along there, look, then we get a straight line in terms of our zoom. Okay, and what we're now going to do is we're going to soften this a bit to try and make it a bit more dramatic. So I'm going to click on this keyframe first, okay, and I can come down here, and this is slightly confusing, I think, for people when they first start using the graph editor, because easy ease in and easy ease out, it suggests that you should be easy ease in to the transition and then easy ease out. But what will actually happen is that the easy ease in and out icons, what they talk about is whether you're going into the keyframe or out from it. So the end, the final keyframe in this this transition, I'm going to click easy ease in, because what that's going to do is it's going to soften the graph going into that keyframe, if that makes sense. Now I'm going to click on this one and click easy ease out, and that's going to soften that graph going into this keyframe. Okay, and so very quickly you can hopefully see that even now we've just softened that look just slightly. Okay, now I'm going to bring this back again a little bit just so you can kind of see it's a bit more dramatic. But the next thing I'm going to do, keep that on 160% there, like that. The next thing I'm going to do is use these handles to actually make my graph steeper, because as you might imagine, as the graph gets steeper, that means it's making it more of a change more quickly. So if I do that, you see how it's now sort of jumped in much more quickly. If I drag that so it's almost vertical, then you'll see that it makes a much snappier change between the 2 keyframes. Okay. Now, if I drag that too far, what do you think is going to happen? If I drag that over here, it's not going to allow me to do it, because it's not going to. In some of these values, in the graph editor, it'll actually allow you to go past like the horizontal point, and then of course what will happen is it will start to scale backwards again, because actually what's happening is that our graph has gone past that point, but I'm probably not explaining that very well, so I'll show you that later on when we do like speed ramping and stuff. Okay, so that's like the fastest one, because that's now completely vertical. It's a bit too abrupt that now, so I'm going to soften that slightly by making that more of an angle. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Yeah, so you see what's happening there? So what I've done is I've effectively taken what was a straight line between two transitions, so it was changing at an even speed, and I've now customized it so it's now changing at a different, so it's softer, then more steep here, so it's changing more quickly, and then softer again as it curves back into this keyframe. Okay. And that's the principle really of using the graph editor. What we're going to be doing is using that graph editor to adjust different values, such as scale and rotation and speed and all sorts of things, just to basically make the thing look slicker. So what we've done first of all is we've zoomed in. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use the graph editor to help us to rotate this clip, and then when we rotate the next clip it creates a transition. So what we're going to do now is come to rotation. We already turned our stopwatch on for rotation earlier, and now I'm going to rotate my clip so that it goes to like there. So let's say 22 degrees. Okay. So now, again, same sort of thing. If I start at this keyframe here, then well, you can first of all see that I'm losing some bits on the corner here. Okay, but also it's rotating at a consistent speed. That's not what we want. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come to this point here where my scale keyframe ends, and I'm just going to drag this keyframe forward so that it starts at that point where the scale ends. Okay, so we're not rotating too soon. So now you can see it's rotating. But what I want to do is I want to get that rotation starting off slowly and speeding up and speeding up and speeding up, so that then it transitions into the next clip. Unlike the first one where I sped it up and then slowed it down again as it approached the next keyframe to make it kind of sort of speed up and slow down like that. What I want to do with this one is continually increase the speed so that it's rotating at its fastest when I transition to the next clip. Okay. Same sort of thing then. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this keyframe here, which is my final keyframe in the rotation. I'm going to click on my graph. And so what we've got here is a straight line. But what I'm now going to do is I'm going to click on here, easy ease out, and click on this keyframe, easy ease in. But instead of this softening where it's slower, speeding up and then slowing down again, I'm going to bring this handle up so that actually the rotation just keeps getting faster. Can you see how at the steepest part of the curve now is the point at which it transitions into that rotation? And now, because I know that that's probably going to be a bit quick, yeah, it's a bit too quick, isn't it? What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to drag this keyframe back again to make that curve shallower, just as long as I don't lose any issues with the, yeah, that's fine. So I don't have any points at which it's now rotating and the clip is moving outside of my composition area. I can move that back now, and that's going to help me rotate as increasingly fast. Now, it's not looking quite as good as it could do, I think partially because this is handheld and so the movement of the camera is softening it. But hopefully what you'll see is when we start to actually transition to the next clip, you'll start to hopefully see what I mean. So let's leave that like that for now. Okay, now what we're going to do is move to the next clip, and we're going to basically do the same thing again. So I'm going to close the properties for this wheel, and I'm going to open this next one, and I'm going to open the transform controls. Actually no, I'm going to keep my wheel open for now just because I need to see what it is. So it's 160% and 22 degrees, and I'm basically going to do the same thing. So on this clip now, I'm going to have my stopwatch on for scale and rotation, and I'm going to start with this clip scaled up to 160%, just like the other clip. Okay, so it's the same, and I'm going to start by rotating it. Now I need to rotate it this way, of course, because the other one was rotating counterclockwise, wasn't it? This clip started by rotating. As I move into it, it then rotates counterclockwise. And so in order for the transition between the two clips to work, I need this one to start off center, so that as I rotate this counterclockwise, it moves in to the shot that we actually want. So what we're going to do now then is I'm going to get to this point where he's about to come into shot, let's say like that. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate. So again, I've just got my keyframe here, and I'm going to rotate this back to 0. Okay, like that. So that's the point at which he jumps into the shot. So can you see what's happening now as I'm rotating the first clip, and then this second one's rotating as well, and that helps us to transition in. But because that first one, I was using my graph editor to speed that one up, what I now need to do is highlight this rotation keyframe, use my graph editor, and again, now I've got this straight line. I'm going to click here for easy ease out, and this one for easy ease in. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is the same thing as I did before, but in reverse. I'm now going to drag this handle and make that steeper, so I might need to move that along a bit further to make that a bit steeper, like so. And so now theoretically that should now, like so. You see how that's working? So I might move that back slightly more. And what's happening is the speed that this clip is rotating at is fastest at the beginning, and then is slowing down as he jumps into shot. Okay, like so. See that? So that's the sort of thing that we're trying to achieve in our transitions between these clips. Okay, now then, for the next bit, I want to introduce speed ramping by doing the time remapping on these clips. Okay, but the next bit where I paused this and allowed it to scale back, that is slightly more advanced. So what I'm going to do next is move us on a little bit to another clip. Okay, and I want to just show you how the time remapping works. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this clip here. So I'm just going to close these values for now. Okay, so here's our clip, and here's George coming over the berm and then doing his kick turn and then riding back again. And what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to slow this down just to the point where he does his kick turn. Okay, so this works in the same way, but we now have to add a different value, because previously we were using transform for things like scale and rotation, and what we need to do now is we need to remap the time for this clip. So I'm going to click on this clip, I'm going to right click and go to time and enable time remapping. Okay, and what you'll end up with is keyframes which are connected to this clip in different ways. Okay, so like you've got one at the end and one at the beginning, which is kind of where the clip began. Okay, and what I'm going to do is effectively I'm going to be moving my playhead. Let me just sort of begin by trying to show you the slowing down part of speed ramping, and then we'll speed it up as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my playhead marker through, and he's taken his foot off, and what I want to do is slow it down just at that point where he like lands on his foot. So it's about there, isn't it? That's the point where he's like actually putting pressure through his foot. So that's kind of roughly where his foot's landed on the ramp. Okay, now here's my time remap effect, and I'm going to create a keyframe here. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to move this along to the point where he now drops back in, and I'm going to make another keyframe. Now at this point, particularly because this is the last clip in the sequence, what you might want to do is make sure that you've got one of the clips highlighted and go to composition and composition settings. At the moment this composition's duration is 23 seconds and 15 frames, so that's how long our composition is currently. Okay, and what you might want to do is just add a little bit extra onto the end of it, just to give you a bit of wiggle room to play with. Okay, what I usually do just for ease is whatever speed this composition, or duration this composition is at, I now just delete that and then go to 1, and what that means is that it's now 1 minute 23, so that's going to give us loads of extra space. We don't need that much, but it's just one of those things. Okay, I'm going to click OK, and now what it means is that if I zoom out of my composition, we can now see all this extra stuff, which is just extra space that just helps us to move around and navigate what we're doing. Because now what we're going to do is we're basically going to say, right, see how this keyframe here is almost at 15 seconds. Well, that's where he drops back in. Well, what I want is actually for that point at which he drops back in to be at 16 seconds or 17 seconds, and then it's going to slow down the space between these two keyframes. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight not just that keyframe but also the end one as well to tell After Effects I want to extend the whole composition, and I'm going to drag that so that now that keyframe is at maybe, let's say, 17 seconds. Okay, what I'm basically saying is take the duration of this this trick that he's just done and extend it out so the end of the clip now happens later on in the sequence. Okay, and what we'll now do is as we play it through, he's at normal speed and now suddenly he's slower, and then he drops back in and speeds up again. Okay, so far so good. And I bet you can see what we're going to be doing here now. I'm going to be clicking on one of these keyframes. No, you don't have to highlight both because again it'd be too confusing. You just highlight the one. Oops, move it slightly. There we go. And I'm going to go into my graph editor, and just like before I have a value graph here which is telling me about what my clip is doing. Now some people when they're doing speed ramping prefer to use the speed graph, and that's where we're going to click on this value here and go to speed graph. What this does is it shows us, look, we're at normal speed, so this is like 1 second per second. Now we've dropped the speed down to just over 0.2 of a second per second, and then back up again. And what we can do is we can make that from being an abrupt line, we can now make that into like a curve. Okay, and some people prefer to work like that. Do try both out and see which one you like. Personally though, because I used to using the value graph for the other types of effects as well, I prefer the value graph when I'm using speed as well. So what it's basically doing with the speed graph is it's saying I'm at this speed, now I'm at this speed, and I can create a curve rather than an abrupt line. But I find the value graph where it's basically saying this is where your clip starts and this is where it ends, and if this was a consistent line, then that's like the clip all running at the same speed. But look, we've got this point here where we've slowed it down. Okay, I just find it much easier to navigate personally, so that's just me. So what you're going to do now is I'm going to click on this keyframe, I'm going to put easy ease in, and then this one easy ease out, and you can see what's happening here. I'm going to zoom in on it slightly just so you can see. Okay, and what we've done is we've created a slight softening now of this effect. Okay, so we've zoomed in and now we're, yeah, and what you can do is, I mean, this is obviously quite a small amount of time that we've extended here, but traditionally what you would do is you would move your the arm of your keyframe, and you would try and line it up with the direction of this, so to try and make a nice smooth curvature. And it's the same here to create this nice smooth curvature. Now, the only thing that you'll find with speed ramping in the value graph is that if you go too far, this is what I was saying earlier, okay, is that now I've gone too far and my line has actually gone back down again. And what you can hopefully see, if I extend that to make it more obvious, is that now the graph is consistently going up and up and up, and now it's going back down again. And what that means is actually my clip is going to go backwards. See? Which again, it can be a technique that people do use, you know, and it kind of works, but it's not what I want for this particular sequence. Okay, so what you want to try and do is you want to try and avoid that getting too close to the horizontal, because if it does, then that's when you're going to get freeze frames and potentially bits going backwards and all that sort of thing. So in this context, while I do want to try and use my handles to match the line of my clip, match the line of my graph, I don't want to do that too much, because otherwise, there we go, otherwise I might end up with something that looks a bit too blocky. Okay, now when you are doing something like this and you've only got a few a short amount of time that you actually want to change in terms of your speed ramp, this is where you can also add easy ease out of this one and easy ease in for this one. So now I've got softening in both directions, and what that allows me to do now is sort of adjust that a little bit so that it isn't just it isn't just a straight line and then suddenly gets to the keyframe and now it becomes softer. What I can now do is it becomes a smoother process between the two, you see? So this is how our graph, our speed ramping graph works. I mean, what we've got now is we don't want to have too much of a curve on this one, because obviously then that's going to be gradually speeding up again over time, which isn't really what we want. So we might want to just make that like so, and make this one a bit more consistent. So it's only a subtle curve, but what it does is it just softens that edge a bit more, like so. Okay. So that's the speed ramping graph. And the final thing that I just wanted to show you today, because then you can go and have a practice with this stuff by yourself, is just that thing I was talking about earlier where he comes in and then we're going to pause that. Okay, so what we're going to do is close this one down and go into this jump on the wheelie one. Okay, so we've rotated him in, so now we've got our nice sort of speed transition here, and here he comes as our jump, right? And what we're going to do is there's a point, isn't there, where the bike changes its angle. So I'm going to just get it to that point where it's almost like a sort of at the apex of the jump, like that. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this clip and I'm going to go to time and enable time remapping. And I'm going to make a time remap keyframe here. Now, you can do freeze frames and things like that, but again, using the graph editor, what I tend to do for stuff like this is I'm going to, on my Mac, I'm going to hold down Command and just use my arrow key to move along by one frame. I'm not sure what the it is on a PC, but if you're using a keyboard that has page up and page down keys, you can use page up and page down to do frame by frame advance, just like you do in Premiere with the arrow keys. Okay, so what I've done is I've moved forward by a single frame, and now I'm going to click again, and it doesn't look like much until I click away, and hopefully you can see if I zoom in, I've actually got two keyframes here that are one frame apart. All right. Now then, what we're going to do is I'm going to get to this point where I want to freeze my clip. Okay, so I'm going to get to there like that, so that should be frozen, and now about here I'm going to scale my clip back. So I'm now going to come to there, I'm going to put myself a keyframe in there, and then I'm going to scale it back like over that amount of time maybe. Okay, so I'm going to scale this back down now to 100%. Okay. Now you can see at the moment what's happened is because I haven't adjusted my time remapping, I'm now scaling this back and the bike is still moving, and what I want to do is I want the bike to freeze while I zoom back out. Okay, that's fine, don't worry about that, we're going to do that in a second. First things first, what I'm going to do is just make this scale back nice and smooth by again clicking on my graph editor. I'm going to click easy ease out and easy ease in, and that's going to hopefully make this nice and smooth. Just so you know, you don't have to go into the graph editor to do those. Let's see, how does that look? Okay, yeah, it's not looking too bad. I think I want it to be a bit shorter and maybe a bit steeper, so there we go. That'll do. Okay. Right, so let's just leave it at that because I don't want to sport with your patience by sort of dabbling with that. But let's say that that's our zoom now. Okay. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to go back to my time remap. Okay. And if I zoom in a little bit, hopefully you can see what's going on. Here's the end of my my scale. So that's the point where the scale is there. And what I can do to begin with is I can take that keyframe that I had initially, the second keyframe, okay, and then I'm also going to hold down Shift to adjust the end, and I'm going to drag that keyframe back to here. Okay, but you'll notice that even though it was only a single frame, I'm still getting some movement. Okay, so here's my bike jumping into frame, and what I want to do now is scale it back so that the bike is frozen while I snap back away from it. Okay, so here's the thing with After Effects, right? I'm going to keep my playhead marker there, and I'm going to move this back this way, and I'm going to keep moving it until it's no longer moving. All right, so it's no longer moving now. That's the same frame as it was before. So I'm going to drag this back again. I know this is a bit bizarre, but bear with me, because what we're going to do is that's the point at which it transitions. See there? Okay, so now what we can do is we get to this point and it's actually frozen, he says. There we go. So that's now not moving. Oh, it is still moving. Look, there was a frame there, wasn't there? So we need to get to that point. We need to drag this back. It needs to get to a point where it's going back a frame. There we go. That's it. There we go. There. Okay. So now what's happened is we've moved this time remapping along so far that now that single frame is being extended where the bike has paused. That single frame is being extended for the duration of our pullback. Okay, but wait, we now have all this extra gap. If I wind this clip out here, we now have all this extra gap where the clip now isn't moving properly. Okay, and we want it obviously to sort of speed up back to normal speed. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put my playhead marker at the end of the there, like so. So that's the point at which my scale is now completed. I'm going to highlight this time remap and I'm going to click on my graph. And what I'm actually going to do now, weirdly, is I'm going to bring this keyframe back to here. So that's the point now at which my clip, my scale adjustment, there we go, has changed. And the key thing is to make sure that this is horizontal. Okay, so make sure that that's horizontal, so that now it's going to just carry on moving. And what we've got is now I want to move this keyframe back so that that's at about the same angle as before. Okay, so I mean it's fine. I'm going to adjust that one again later on, but I'm just going to keep that playing at the same speed. Okay, like that. It's perhaps a little bit quick. I'm going to do that. Okay, now what we've got here is a situation, I don't know if this is making sense to you or not, but what we've got here is a situation where we've got our speed of my clip is going consistently here. Now he jumps into frame, and now what we've done is taken the speed and literally made it like it's now this graph, as you can see, it's completely horizontal, so it's not progressing at all. So it's basically saying at this point I want you to be completely frozen and then get to the next frame here and then continue as normal. Okay, and that's completely fine, except that of course because this is one frame, if we now click here and go easy ease in and then click here and go easy ease out, there's nothing we can adjust. We can't really do anything. You know, anything like that is going to change the effect because that's now speeding that up again, and that would be reversing it, and so on and so on. What we want to do is want to keep that horizontal, okay, so that it basically is saying, so I'm just going to undo all that. It's basically saying take that frame and then keep that without moving until the graph picks up again. So instead of that, what we're going to do is we're now going to click these keyframes and we're going to go easy ease into that one and easy ease out of this one, okay, and I'm going to use my handles to make that a nice adjustment like so, so it's not too curved, but I'm just curving it just enough so it doesn't feel abrupt. There we go, and now it speeds up again, you see. So as I say, I appreciate that might not necessarily make a huge amount of sense, but effectively what we've done is we went into here first, we made a keyframe. Oh, there's a train going past my house. Made a keyframe at the point where we wanted the clip to pause, okay. Then we dragged the next frame away from it to make sure that After Effects was only going to be using this one frame, okay. But then in the graph editor we took that next frame back again to the point where we wanted the speed to start, and then we just adjusted the graph to make sure that that speed was playing at the right pace as the clip progressed, okay. So if we look at that in the graph editor again, then what we can see is here's the speed of the clip progressing nicely, because we've added our transition point. It's a little bit curved, and then we have a completely horizontal line here, which is us saying that frame there, don't advance it until you get to this next keyframe, and then you can carry on advancing as normal. That's effectively what we've done. Okay, and so what we end up with is this transition where we now get to rotate into our clip, and then he gets to pause, we move back, and now we've got our thing. Okay, a final thing then that you can do is obviously you can use speed ramping the other way as well. So if I was to, for example, get to this point here where he's on his doing his wheelie, okay, and I can now add on my time remap, I can now add another keyframe, okay, and then all I need to do is get to the end, this point where he goes out of shot, add another keyframe into my time remap, and then I literally just highlight these two, just like we did with the other, but I'm now going to bring them together, and it's the same sort of thing. Okay, so now what we've got is a point where you go and suddenly he's sped up. Okay, same sort of thing, easy in and out. I'm going to click on that and go into my graph editor, okay, and instead of so there's my easy ease in and out, as you can see. Instead of that, what I'm going to do is what I did before, where I'm just going to make that consistently get faster and faster, so it's now a curve where it's going to speed up and up and up, and then it's going to transition into the next clip just like we did before. Okay, the final thing that you can do when you're using this sort of stuff, okay, is just an effect that people like to add. So hopefully we'll be able to sort of show you what this looks like if I move that back a bit, like so. If I come off here, okay, and then I go over to my effects and presets, and I type in CC Force. So Force Motion Blur is, if I drag that down onto this clip, what it does is the Force Motion Blur, now you can see what it's done is as that clip is now moving faster, it makes the motion blur faster to match the speed of the clip. So at the moment, he's not really, I mean, he's kind of moving a bit there, obviously, but now it's going to create that motion blur, and then he's going to basically speed it up. So as the effect speeds up, you'll see that the blur increases. There we go, like so, to match the speed of the clip. Okay, so that's not necessarily always going to be appropriate. It's just an effect that people sometimes use to help the sort of rotations and scaling and bits and pieces and the speed ramping to kind of look more effective, is by adding sort of whooshing effects and stuff like that to emphasize that there's been a transition, and then also this force effect so that the blur becomes more pronounced the faster the transition starts to move, and it just ends up helping the whole thing look a bit more sort of sophisticated. So I appreciate this has been a long tutorial. Thank you for bearing with me on this one. I hope that this now makes a bit more sense. That what you can do is you can use this graph to transition between different states, and the thing really with this sort of stuff is just to play with it, you know, just try stuff out, just try rotations, try scaling, try using your graph to kind of manipulate them and see what you end up with. So I'll leave it there because it's been a long tutorial, but thank you for bearing with me, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with. So cheers everybody, nice one.